Welcome, guys, to where we descend into the bedroom of absolute power. Tonight, we are going to take a steep plunge into the lavish, absurd, and occasionally unsanitary private chambers of medieval and Renaissance royalty. This is where absolute power, lust, and zero self-control collided in spectacular fashion. This isn't a history lecture. This is the classified dossier on monarchs whose madness made entire nations tremble. We're talking about kings who believed they were made of glass, rulers who taxidermied their enemies for display, and those who nearly started civil wars over sexual obsession. The stark truth is, when you wear a crown, delusion comes standard, and when you are king, no one dares say no. The real question is, how did their private insanity destroy an entire empire? Dim the lights, turn on a fan to ward off the chills, and let's delve into the secret together with Flow of History. We begin with the most terrifying group, the monarchs whose madness was not just vice, but clinical pathology. They forced their subjects to contend not with tax policy, but with royal mental collapse. First is Charles VI of France, reigned $1,380 $1,422. He was famously nicknamed Charles the Mad. He started as a young, handsome, and capable king. Then, things spiraled. He began forgetting who he was, attacking his own knights. The peak of his delusion was believing he was made of glass, insisting his servants wrap him in padded blankets so he wouldn't shatter while walking. Sounds harmless, but this was the sitting king. During one infamous event, the Bal des Ardents, $1,393, he and his friends dressed as flammable wild men and danced with torches. Predictably, a flame dropped, and several were burned alive. Charles survived, but his dignity and France did not. While he lived in a glass delusion, France descended into chaos and civil war. Next is Eric XIV of Sweden, $1,560, $1,568. Eric was a handsome, intelligent king, but was plagued by astrology and paranoia. He married a commoner, enraging the nobility. Eric, convinced of conspiracies, eventually descended into homicidal rage. The climax was the Stir murders, a dinner party ending with Eric personally stabbing a nobleman while shouting things that made his courtiers question whether astrology had finally broken his mind. The nobility ultimately intervened by imprisoning him in a castle and handing the crown to his brother. Then there's Wenceslas IV of Bohemia, $14 $th century. If Charles VI was obsessed with glass, Wenceslas was obsessed with alcohol. He was notorious for hosting multi-day drinking sessions where policy decisions were made between rounds of mead. He also developed the charming habit of streaking through the castle naked, sometimes mid-meeting. It's difficult to argue policy with a man wearing a crown and a longsword, but no pants. Eventually, the Holy Roman Empire deposed him for being too drunk too often. And finally, Christian VII of Denmark, $18 and $2h century. This king suffered from severe mental illness, likely schizophrenia. He enjoyed masturbating in public, talking to his hand, and riding imaginary horses down palace corridors. He became more of a royal mascot than a monarch. This paved the way for one of history's great scandals. Queen Caroline Matilda began an affair with the king's personal doctor, Johann Friedrich Struensee, who effectively became the ruler of Denmark, signing laws and keeping Christian occupied with games. This is the only love triangle in history where one corner was just vaguely humming to himself. See? When the king goes mad, his wife's lover and his doctor seize the power. This group proves that the greatest brutality is not inherent madness, but the cold calculation of pride and the need for control. First is Philip IV of France, $1,285, $1,314. He was called Philip the Fair, but not for his personality. Philip appeared pious and serious, but inwardly, he was a terrifying hypocrite. His most notorious scandal was the Tour de Nesle affair. His daughters-in-law were caught committing adultery. Philip punished them brutally. 2 princesses were shaved and imprisoned, while the knights involved were tortured, flayed, and publicly executed. But while he handed out brutal punishments, rumors circulated that Philip himself kept mistresses in private rooms of the Louvre. When you write the laws, it's easy to turn sin into strategy. This hypocrisy led to his greatest crime, the destruction of the Knights Templar. Philip IV owed the Templars massive sums and couldn't control their political independence. Therefore, he fabricated grotesque heresy charges to bankrupt and destroy his creditors. Next is Ferdinand I of Naples, $15 of $th century. This king had a rare blend of brutality and macabre hobbies. When he wasn't busy balancing the budget, Ferdinand indulged in a hobby that would make you cancel all dinner plans: human taxidermy. After executing rebellious nobles, he had them embalmed and displayed in a private museum beneath his castle, called the Black Room. He personally gave tours to foreign dignitaries and potential traitors, describing each corpse by name, crime, and expression. Nothing says, behave yourself, like showcasing your collection of preserved political mistakes. And of course, there is Henry VIII of England, $16, $th century. Henry was the king who turned relationships into a prolonged horror series. He essentially invented Anglicanism just to pursue his dating life. When Catherine of Aragon refused to divorce, Henry accepted the political stalemate. But when Anne Boleyn failed to deliver a son, Henry would not accept failure. He couldn't admit he was wrong, that he had wrecked the church for a woman. Therefore, he framed Anne as a traitor to protect his pride. Henry manufactured the narrative he wanted the public to believe. He was the victim, not the sinner. Finally, Peter I of Castile, $14, $th century, known as Peter the Cruel. His idea of romance was a curious blend of royal charm and homicidal jealousy. He married Blanche of Bourbon for political alliance, but locked her in a castle $3 days later because he preferred his mistress, Maria de Padilla. When another mistress, Donna Juana, tried to leave, she was found dismembered $14 th century murder by ghosting. He often relaxed by watching executions from his balcony with his mistress. This group simply couldn't control themselves, causing political chaos purely through ill-timed desires. We must start with John of England, $1,199, $1,216, or John Lackland. His political failures were somehow worse than his personal life. John was notorious for kidnapping noble women, imprisoning them, and entertaining them. His favorite technique for breaking up powerful families wasn't battle, but seducing the wife, alienating the husband, and then charging him double taxes. Chroniclers found this behavior so distasteful, writing that he was not temperate with women and did not abstain from wives and daughters of others. This behavior was so bad it nearly started a rebellion, not over taxes, but because half the barons were afraid to leave their wives unattended during royal visits. The result? John forced the barons to draft the Magna Carta not just to limit the king's taxing power, but to protect their families. Next is Edward II of England, $1,307, $1,327. He was notorious for favoring his male companions over his actual queen. His favorite, Piers Gaveston, was granted ridiculous titles and jewels, even upstaging Isabella of France at the coronation. The nobles demanded Piers be executed. After Piers was executed, Edward replaced him with Hugh Despencer the Younger, turning Queen Isabella from a betrayed wife into a vengeful revolutionary. She teamed up with her lover to overthrow, imprison, and potentially assassinate Edward, rumored to be with a red-hot poker. Then there's Charles II of England, $1,660, $1,685, the Merry Monarch. He returned from exile with one clear agenda: bring fun back, preferably with as many mistresses as possible. He had dozens of official mistresses, most famously Nell Gwyn, the actress. He didn't pretend to be discreet, paying them government pensions and even building a corridor at Whitehall so they could reach his bedroom without disturbing ambassadors. Charles fathered at least $14 illegitimate children, while his legitimate wife, Queen Catherine of Braganza, remained childless. A king who ruled like the entire nation was the final night of a royal bachelor series. And we can't forget Louis XV of France, $18 $th century. He ran the country like an endless after-party where governance was optional. He is famous for the Parc aux Cerfs, the Deer Park, a quiet house near Versailles he used to recruit young, poor girls. His most famous mistress, Madame de Pompadour, ran France from behind the scenes. When she lost interest in the physical side, Louis built another harem to keep her for her brain and use others for lust. He spent so much time at the park aux serfs that his grandson, Louis XVI, paid the ultimate price in the revolution. Finally, Alfonso XI of Castile, $14 century. He had one hobby, publicly ignoring his wife in the most extravagant way possible. His wife was Maria of Portugal, but he only cared about his mistress, Leonor de Guzman. Alfonso made Leonor his shadow queen, building her palaces and fathering $11 children with her. Queen Maria was left alone at royal events like an unwanted centerpiece. The situation became so tense that Maria's father, the King of Portugal, considered invading Castile over the public humiliation. It took the Black Death to end the affair. After Alfonso died, Queen Maria took her revenge by imprisoning and executing Leonor. In short, these stories point to a harsh truth. Absolute power is no guarantee of sanity, civility, or self-control. King John forced his barons to draft the Magna Carta, not just to limit taxes, but to protect their wives. Henry VIII destroyed religion and executed others simply to preserve his ego. Charles VI drove France into chaos because he believed he was made of glass. They were men who could control armies, laws, and the lives of millions. But they could not control their own paranoia, rage, or lust. The final irony: when power becomes limitless, the true sovereign is not the king, but his own psychological flaws. These monarchs were not just debauched. They are proof that personal weakness can become a national catastrophe. They turned the throne into a theatrical nightmare, and history was their unwilling audience. What do you think? Which behavior was the worst? Peter I's cruelty or Louis XV's public decay? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to explore more hidden corners and classified dossiers of history, be sure to subscribe and share the Flow of History channel so you don't miss the next story.